What I found strange now that the dust has settled on the latest X-Men and Spider-Man films is the fan and critical reaction to both entries in the franchise. Each feature iconic comic book characters, impressive CGI and action sequences, solid casting decisions, both draw from iconic materials, and yet we've got Days of Future Past with the highest international opening of any X-Men film, and the highest Rotten Tomatoes score, and then Spider-Man 2.1. And I know that's not what it's called, I'm just going to call it that because it's easier. Somehow opening as the lowest Spider-Man film with the worst Rotten Tomatoes score. Now I know that sites like Rotten Tomatoes don't necessarily mean everything, so here's some opinions from your man on the street movie fan. Dirge Winner 100 Reloaded says, I do not like the movie. Christopher Nolan should have done it. Without him, it is just not serious enough. Shah Rizzle says, they turned Spider-Man movie into Twilight shit. Fuck! Followed closely by Santiago Benegas stating, this movie is horrible, and the Green Goblin looked like shit with the terrible makeup. Mr. Fleck echoes this sentiment with, this movie sucked a lot of balls. Well, most of that was insane. Anyways, inarguably, the most recent Spider-Man series is more accurate to its comic incarnation than any of the characters in the X-Men films. The X-Men films are constantly melding together mutants and altering their powers, plus their role in the team, plus the costumes, which are just like, I mean, everything. Pretty much everything is different. And if you've read the Days of Future Past comic, you'd know that it's really just that story in name only. The X-Men movie continuity also is broken. I mean, less so after the recent time shift, but it's still broken. Spider-Man 2.1, on the other hand, adapts the classic Death of Gwen Stacy story, has the most comic book accurate Spider-Man suit and web swinging we've ever seen. It includes villains that are, alright, some of them aren't exactly spot on, but Spider-Man himself is more Spider-Man than any Spider-Man that's ever Spider-Maned before. This, though, seems to mean very little to anybody. So let's take a look at a few reasons why. Spider-Man 2.1 feels like a movie designed by a committee, force-fed elements that Sony thinks fans will just lose their minds over. On paper, as mentioned, it's got everything a Spider-Man film needs. Likeable lead characters, visceral action scenes, classic villains, and yet it feels like a movie more informed by a marketing focus group than its director. It's trying to do way too much, and in the process amounts to very little. Something that seems to have carried over since Spider-Man 3. Subtitle, what a fucking train wreck. Days of Future Past, on the other hand, for better or worse, feels like a Bryan Singer X-Men film. A singular vision, telling a comparatively tight story where every part fits together snugly. Spider-Man 2.1 plays like a barely linked together collection of scenes because it is. Sony apparently made a decision to film everything they possibly could and then aggressively cut large chunks out of it so that we're left with this bizarre, disjointed final product. Though Days of Future Past did do this to an extent. There's an entire Rogue rescue segment that didn't make the cut. But not including that, didn't break the story. I mean, you just gotta look at Spider-Man 2.1's deleted scenes to realize what's missing. The entire character of Mary Jane Watson. Gone now. Nowhere to be seen. Though that's probably a good move, to be fair. Multiple scenes involving Oscorp monitoring Peter Parker's activity. A post-credit stinger featuring a reanimated Norman Osborn head. And a rumored Green Goblin attack on Oscorp. And the way the movie flows, or more accurately, doesn't, makes this evident, and is the reason why fans are demanding a director's recut. Even with elements of time travel and multiple timelines and the revival of long dead cast members, some of which are sort of explained, not really, Days of Future Past manages to tell a more coherent story. And that really shouldn't be the case. But it is. There are some truly subpar X-Men films. I mean, The Last Stand isn't good by any stretch, and X-Men Origins Wolverine is probably the worst film ever made. However, after it was clear that cinema goers weren't going to put up with any of this nonsense, the X-Men franchise completely shifted direction. Let's hire some good directors, they said. Let's not shoehorn in as many mutants as we can, they said. Let's set an X-Men film in one of the most pivotal decades in recent history, they said. Let's make a Wolverine solo movie that's not brilliant, but you know, it's pretty good. It's got a big robot in it, they said. Whereas with Spider-Man 2.1, they again decide to villain overload, press on with the coma-inducing Richard Parker storyline, and basically make the same Spider-Man story for the 5th time. Allow me to elaborate. Which Spider-Man film am I talking about here? Peter Parker, he's just trying to get along, balancing his personal life with being Spider-Man. He can't get the girl, or he can get the girl, but he doesn't want to get the girl. Responsibility or something. Look out, Spider-Man, someone you know is a villain now for some reason. Oh, the stakes are high because they found out your secret identity. Big thing happens at the end. We're sad now, there's a funeral because someone has died. The answer is, of course, every Spider-Man film. Well, with the exception of 2, which doesn't end with a funeral, but it does every other thing that I just said. My point is, I feel like I'm watching the same Spider-Man film over and over again. And I know the X-Men films aren't all good, but at least there's variety. I'm safe in assuming I'm not the only one who thinks this, right? Though to be fair, they did include that dubstep monster in the latest. Never seen that before. Look, I'm not saying The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is all bad. And I'm not saying X-Men Days of Future Past is the best film ever made. I don't even think it's the best X-Men film. If you do want to see my actual reviews for those, you can find them on my channel. What I'm trying to drive home here is, Sony have been pushing the same Spider-Man film on us since 2002, refusing to consider someone else taking on the mantle, but with some vague promise of a couple of villain spin-off films down the line that surely they've now reconsidered. Not that I doubt they'll go ahead with them anyway. But Fox, like them or not, are moving forward with their franchise, exploring new territories, making people excited for the future of the X-Men universe. I don't know. The Winter Soldier's a better film than both of them anyway. Thanks everyone. Now if you like comic books, or comic book movies, or any of that stuff, why not check out my podcast, The Weekly Planet, on the fantastic comicbookmovie.com, or iTunes, or a bunch of other places. They're all linked below. People seem to like it, so yeah, feel free to do that. Or maybe check out one of my other videos. Like the X-Men films, they certainly aren't all winners, but at least Brett Ratner hasn't made any of them. I'm genuinely interested though. Which do you prefer? The Spider-Man films, including the Raimi ones, or the X-Men films? Leave your thoughts below or via my Twitter and Facebook pages, both ending in Mr. Sunday Movies, if you have anything to say about that. Thanks everyone, take care.